Possible. I'm Kris Barney, and I'm excited to have my guest, Kris Miles.
Two Krises.
Yeah, two Krises. Krises are good.
Krises are great.
I am excited to have him. He is going to be sharing some great information today about finding those money leaks that you have and freeing up more cash so you don't have to live paycheck to paycheck. As well as we're even going to touch on those relationships. Finding a way to learn the money principles and the things that can help you and a spouse or a significant other come into the same belief system, the same principles, and actually do better with your money. So I just am excited to have Kris here and to be able to let you hear some of his story and what we have to share from him. Before we get started though, I want to invite you to go to allthingspossible.biz to get your 7 traits. If you haven't gotten them yet, click on that button and get it, because it will help you in so many areas of your life. So go to our website, www.allthingspossible.biz, and click on that. Let us give to you the 7 traits and get you started. So without any other things, we're going to jump in here with our interview. Kris Miles is a dear friend of mine, and also we seem to have events the same weekends, a few miles or blocks, not even miles apart. And it's been interesting that for a while, every time we had an event, we both had the event the same day.
Right, exactly.
But I have been able to go to his event and be able to enjoy Money Ripples is your company, and he teaches so many fabulous things. Today we're going to focus a little bit on getting on the same page with your spouse, finding out how to go without living paycheck to paycheck, and freeing up some of that cash. There's money leaks and everything else. But before we get into all of those, I want you to be able to share some of your story, Kris, because I've heard his story, and I know I share a ton of stories on things that I've been able to overcome and things that have happened. So why don't you just spend a few minutes and share your story with us?
You bet. So I was born... I'm just kidding, I won't go there. So I'll tell you, I actually started in business about 13 years ago because I really wanted more freedom, more control, more ability to control my life and have more. And so I took the path that wasn't necessarily the easier path.
Right.
Especially because when I went into business, I was just getting engaged with my wife right now.
Wow.
And so she loved it, obviously. It's been a fun road. And I wanted to go into business, and I knew if I wanted to become a business consultant, which was my aim, I should probably have a real business. And so I did. I ended up becoming a financial planner. That was my first thing. And so I became a financial advisor, did that for 4 years, loved it. But unfortunately, I realized it just didn't work. Right? And so I left that altogether. I said, that's it. I'm done. No more money. I will just teach ballroom dancing. That's it. And I actually did that for a little while. But I wanted to teach something differently. And I realized really quick that as I started to have some millionaire mentors that helped me, they would say things like, no, it's not, you don't just think differently, you think the exact opposite of what most people do.
Right.
And it was actually able to get me to retire when I was 28 years old and help me through a lot of things. And I'll tell you, I've seen ups and I've seen downs. I mean, I've seen great things. You know, I've seen what it's like to become a millionaire. I've seen what it's like to lose $1 million. And then some.
I have not been able to watch myself lose $1 million. That's one of the trials I have not had and am not going to.
I don't ever recommend it. No, it was a blessing in disguise for sure, but I would never want to ever repeat that.
Right.
And but I mean, that's the thing, is it wasn't always just easy for me. I mean, I knew what it was like to be paycheck to paycheck, or even worse, in the whole $16,000 a month and about $1 million in debt. It was just not fun. But the good thing is, like with every experience, you know, it gives you that momentum, that real power, right? That ability to overcome. And when you overcome something like that, it hasn't just blessed my life, but it's blessed hundreds of people's, maybe probably thousands of lives, I'm sure.
Well, and you do work a lot with businesses, and you've got a phenomenal amount of money you've been able to save. Why don't you share that with us? Yeah,
so just of the clients I've had, which has been over about 500, almost 600 clients in the last few years, it's been about between $50 and $60 million that we've helped them save.
That's too big of a number for my brain right now. But one of the things that I have learned is you have taught about money leaks. Mm-hmm. And what could you tell our audience about where their money is leaking? Like what does that mean, money leaks?
If you don't know, then it's leaking somewhere. I mean, we all do. I mean, nobody's perfect with their money. I mean, not even me. I mean, I lose money here and there. It's always leaking somewhere, right? But the key is really trying to pay attention to it. Most people, what happens is they don't pay attention. They think, oh, money's hard, and they've been taught this by people that are usually on TV or on radio, like pointing fingers at scorn and saying, you stink, you should just do what we say, and then you do what they say, and it's never enough, and that kind of thing. And I'm like, no, that's not the way it should be. And, and so what happens is that you try to do everything possible, but often you think it's a negative conversation, and not to mention when you're married, or if you have a partner, you already know how sensitive a conversation that could be, because I'm sure if you're like any of us, most of us have probably married our opposites, especially with money. And so it makes it really tough. And so be able to get people on the same page and understand that you don't want to ignore your money, because it can be a real positive conversation. It can be lots of fun. It can be something you really look forward to. And that's the key. Right.
And you teach how to have your financial prosperity and that abundance.
Yeah.
And I've been married over 30 years. And there's definitely times that the money comes up and it's like, I do things one way, he does things, we were both raised. What in different financial situations, what are some suggestions that we could give that would help them right now on how to get on the same page and some of the things maybe that you teach?
You bet. So first thing is that what I recommend is do everything possible you can, all things possible, right?
Right, all things
everything possible you can to make sure that you actually meet together weekly. If you can get together once a week, it could be just 15 to 30 minutes, not a lot of time. Preferably not a date night, but this could work.
If you're in business, it's a great date night.
That's right, exactly.
That's what I do.
Yeah, exactly. It's business.
Business dinner, talk about it, keep some notes.
Yeah. So, it could be any time, though. It could be morning, it could be night, it could be a weekend, it could be a Sunday, whatever works best for you guys to get together, have that time to be together and say, hey, let's just talk about what's going on. What happened last week? What's coming up this week? Because if you've ever been like any of the rest of us, when you maybe have an extra $300, and then both you think you have $300, and you both spend accordingly. Then next thing you know, you're like, wait a minute, what happened here? This shouldn't have happened. And then there's stress, and then all of a sudden you're not talking to each other, and and your kids all of a sudden see that example, and what does that create for generations beyond you, right?
Exactly. And I talk a lot on relationships, and we talk a lot on that. Being open and having communication. It comes down to that. Communication about money is important.
Oh, yeah. I have one client, actually. He'd been married for 35 years. And he said, he's like, finally, my wife and I have actually been talking about it for the first time. He's like, my kids have grandkids, and they've already known. They've never seen us talk about things, especially about money, right?
Right.
Here's a good first suggestion. Like, you're a good first date, or whatever you want to call it, right? The first time you meet. Really ask a question. You have to understand your spouse first before you just try to jump into it, because one of you is going to be more ambitious about this than the other.
Exactly.
And if you're the ambitious one, which it probably is because you're watching this because you are the ambitious one, if that's the case, here's how to not make them feel like dirt when they're meeting with you, right? So one, ask the question really quickly is how are you raised about money? What were your parents like? So ask your spouse that question. What were your parents like? How were you raised around money? What was that conversation like?
Because that's their beliefs.
That's their beliefs. Yeah,
that's their beliefs.
We all have, like you said, we all have these different backgrounds we're trying to bring together and mesh into a new family, a new culture. And come on, it can be a little bit tense at times. Because more likely one of you is more of the spender, the other is more like the saver. The key is they actually come in the middle. You want to be the steward. And we talk a lot about that. Maybe we'll talk about that more later. But try not to be too far to the extreme, but coming together and really finding that middle ground. Because you'll realize that you're both right in different ways.
Exactly.
But understanding where they're coming from, you might have a little bit more compassion. And I think in marriages, there's a lot of compassion that's missing. And so that's a big one. The other one I would ask is this, is if you had an extra $100,000, what would you do with that money? This will tell you very quickly that if you don't know, if you haven't already figured out what your spouse is, this will tell you pretty quickly what your spouse is. And you probably will find out you have very different answers.
Right. I would put mine in an investment, and my husband would put it in savings.
Exactly. No tug of war here going on, right?
Not at all.
And that's good, because you want to know where each other are coming from. And sometimes it'll surprise you. You might actually say, wait, you said that? Like, you actually want that? And especially if I get two spouses that actually agree, I'll say, all right, who's the bully in the family? Who told you to do that? And it's interesting because it's actually, a lot of times, very rarely that'll ever be the case. Usually it'll be very different answers. You might coincide on a few things. But really listen to that answer, because that will tell you a lot about their perspective and what they really want, and maybe what they stress about. Exactly. So those are two great questions to start with right there.
That's perfect. And having that principle of actually having that conversation. Like
Yes.
making it a priority and a principle, not just like, oh, once in a while we talk about it. But actually having it be this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it.
Make it enjoyable, make it fun. And seriously, like, do not, really be gentle. I mean, marriage is already sensitive enough as it is, without money. You put in money into the mix, and it can be a very sensitive topic. And you don't want to make that this way. I mean, it's going to be, depending on how long you've been married, that was great, wasn't it? It was like Porky Pig right there. Depending on how long you've been married, you might have a lot of baggage over the years. The thing I would ask you is, if there is, forgive your spouse. Start from today and move forward. Don't use the past as a hostage. And trust me, we all do it. I mean, we all do it to some level, right? And easier said than done. But if you really try to move forward and say, hey, listen, we both really want the money to be a good thing. How can we bring that together so that it's not a source of contention anymore, but it's something that we can really move forward together and have a lot of progress and create a new future, not the same old past. Because if you keep bringing up the same old stuff, you're not going to see a new future.
Right. You can't change the past except how you feel about it. So decide that you want to feel like it doesn't help you to have that anymore. The other thing is, when I say we go to a restaurant, I think that I actually did that on accident, because when we talked about money, it was just like, that wasn't something that my husband wanted to talk about. And it wasn't that Bill wasn't good with money. He was just like, here's the check, go do what you got to do. Here you go. He just brought it home and I handled it.
Right.
And when I was like, okay, you've got to be more involved with this, it was like that safety place. So if going to a restaurant and being like, we're having a money talk and this is what we're going to be doing, so that both people know, it's not an entrapment of, we're going to get to the restaurant and it's a safe place because you can't freak out. That's not what this is about. But it might help to have it at a restaurant for those first few, to get it to where it's not a heated discussion and it's not out of...
There's too many witnesses.
Yeah.
There's no way you can kill them without anybody knowing.
But no, it can be a safe place. And,
absolutely.
And that's one of the things, is make sure it's a safe place that you know that both of you get to have an opinion and both of you get to be involved.
That's right. And that's the key. You're a partnership. You're working together. You move forward together. And I'll tell you, you work so much better together than you do working against each other. I mean, you don't want to have that money infidelity that happens, you know, where you're keeping secret money aside or doing decisions that your spouse don't know about. I mean, that can cause a lot of mistrust, and that will also cause them to mistrust you in other areas of your marriage too.
Exactly.
So really, this is important.
Tell us a little bit about the steward. You touched on it, being a good money steward.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
So what I mean is, a steward, so you have a saver, right? Savers are always big on saving. They want to put money away, they want to pay off all their debt, and even if you save money, it's never enough for them. There's a scarcity mentality of there's never enough, right? Spenders also have that scarcity mentality, where
there's not enough to spend.
There's not enough to spend, right? Like, it's like, well, I spend more, or if I don't spend it, I'm going to spend on something I don't want, so I might as well spend on something I do want, or oh my goodness, my father, he was such a penny pincher, I couldn't stand it, so I'm going to do the opposite. I'll never do that to my kids. I'll let them have whatever they want, and it's not always irresponsible either. I've seen a lot of spenders that sometimes actually have some good discipline. They're not like Spenders Anonymous, you know, or something like that. They don't need a support group, but sometimes they actually have seen that it's just a little tweak. And so steward is right in between the two. If you're a saver, you need to become more like a spender. Because the good thing that spenders do is at least they're willing to use money. Money is meant to be used.
It is.
Egyptians tried not to use it, and all it ended up being is buried in their tombs for somebody to rob later. It didn't go with them to the next life like they thought it would. I mean, it's something to be used right now for the benefit of everybody, for yourself, for everybody else. And so a steward's always looking to how to improve upon things, how to make it better, how to make it grow, how to magnify it, how to beautify with it, how to make everything in life better. That's what a steward really does. And so spenders are good because at least they're willing to use it. Unfortunately, when they use it, it never comes back. Savers, it comes in, but they never let it go. So if the savers can let go a little bit, the spenders can say, wait, I need to slow down, think a little bit more, and be wise. You'll find that that's where the steward is. And when the couples come together there, and they meet that compromised middle ground, which is really the ground that should be on in the first place, you'll realize that it's so much easier to let these things happen. And pretty soon you don't try to make so many accusations about money, especially the one that's a saver. A lot of times you're usually accusing the spender of being the naughty person, right? Like, you know, I have
been the naughty person before with spending. And I've never been a big, like, spender, but I've always been like, oh, I think we need some furniture, or I think we need some of this stuff. And I definitely was the one that was like taking the heat for this is the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't mean to say take the heat, because Bill and I have gotten along really well, and we've been both, it's been good because he balances out me wanting to, go ahead and move forward. At the same time, most of the time I'm spending on him. So,
right.
And he'll be like, don't buy more stuff. And it's, that's something we've had to work together on and become really good at communicating about it.
Yeah, if you really want financial freedom, and especially if you want to stop feeling like you're paycheck to paycheck, you can only become financially free as a steward, never as a saver, and never as a spender. Because savers, I'll tell you, I've seen people with tons and tons of money leaking out their ears, but it's never enough. Like, they're always tight. They always feel like they have to be cheap. And it drives the other spouse, not sometimes even to the point of ruining a marriage.
Right.
Not saying it doesn't take two to tango. Of course you know that, right? But I am.
Of course you're going to use a music term and a dancing term, right?
Naturally. Dun, dun, dun. So yeah, absolutely. So again, coming together on that middle ground, understanding one another, both working together, come to that place of stewardship. It's going to be so much easier. You're going to look at money differently. You look at, how do I accelerate money, not just accumulate it. How can I really be wise at this and make it work in a way that it comes back to me more?
Right.
Once you start doing that, money becomes so much easier, and it doesn't seem like the headache it once was.
What can you tell us about money principles? I teach principles all the time. I know that there's a principle that you've taught that is about the give and take, or the give and receive, and we've talked a lot of those kind of principles in some of the things that I teach. Why don't you share some of that with us?
You bet. So make a clear distinction, because people use principles very loosely.
Exactly.
In my definition of principles, in my humble opinion, IMHO, in spiritual principles, spiritual or financial principles, whatever are principles, they're never ending, they're eternal, right? They always work. Where when it comes to strategies or techniques, they will change with a situation or a circumstance. Exactly. So for example, someone will say, getting out of debt is a principle. No, it's not. Because if it were just getting out of it, it's a strategy, right? Because sometimes you don't want to pay off all your debt. Because if that were the case, you would just go rent a house, right?
Exactly.
Don't even buy a house. Just go rent. Hey, I'm debt free. I have nothing. I'm like, okay, come on. Like, sometimes people get a little bit overboard with it. And it's not that you shouldn't be wise. Again, we talk about stewardship, right? You should be a wise steward.
Right.
But a lot of people get caught up in not knowing the difference between the two, and that's where they go under. That's why they say, well, I was taught to never, ever, ever stop doing this. This is what my grandparent in the Great Depression said. Like, for example, the mortgage, like, you got to pay that off as fast as possible. Well, that's back in the Great Depression. It was actually legal for the banks to call it all due whenever they felt like.
Exactly.
Now, as long as you make payments, they can't do that to you anymore. So, things change. Circumstances change. Techniques and strategies will change, but principles do not. And so, like the one we're talking about here, which is also dealing with us as a couple, or not us as a couple. Don't tell Bill. Shh.
Don't tell.
Or Lindsay. But as couples, right? Like, that exchange. Like, what I've noticed is that the more we exchange, the more wealth we can create. We talked about, like, money going out and then coming back, right? Allowing money to use money. But see, some people just throw money away, and that doesn't work, right? We want it to come back to us. So stewards want the money to come back. They want to create a return on it. It doesn't mean you're always investing, but it means that you want to use it in a way that you know will work for your best benefit. How is it being productive, right? And so when it comes to exchange, it's not just the fact that you want it to come back to you, it's also how fast you want it to go out and come back. Because the faster you exchange, the more money we make. So if you remember the 1990s, remember everybody's like, everything's booming, going crazy, right? Everybody's like, oh, it's because of all the dot-coms. Well, yeah, partly. And it wasn't the stock market. Like, everybody's like, oh, it's the stock market. No, you could totally ignore the stock market. You would have made more money if you understood that exchange creates wealth. That the faster we exchange, the faster it comes back. And so with the invention of the internet, you remember in the 80s, remember those infomercials back then when they'd say, buy now, and they had like the little weird things like, sale, right? We remember the 80s marketing type stuff, right? And you remember like the infomercial would say like, call 1-800 or 1-900 if you had to pay for it, which those were jerks. But 1-800, and then it was like, okay, and you could pay by Visa, MasterCard, American Express, or COD, right? Like,
it's true.
Nobody uses COD anymore. Most people don't even know what it means anymore, right?
Right.
Now we have the internet at any time of the night. You don't even have to have your lines open 24 hours a day to take your call. You just go click, and you make money.
Right.
And so the internet allowed everything to exchange faster, and we all made more money. Well, the same is true with us. If you have an iron grip on your money, if you're a saver and you do not want to let it go, you will find you will have a hard time getting more of it. And that's why I'll never feel like it's enough. Flip side, if you try to let it go too fast, either you give it away or you blow it, you'll also realize it doesn't come back as well. And so understanding the principle of that, how you go and provide value for people, how you go out and serve people, especially in the sense if you're working, the more you try to go and serve somebody, the more it can come back to you. So if you focus on, instead of saying, how can I make more money, which is a horrible question to ask, because everybody's asked that question and it hasn't worked, has it?
Right.
And if that were the case, everybody would have money. No, it's how do I serve more people more quickly? How can I help them better? How can I help them faster?
Exactly.
When you try to do that, when you try to serve and solve problems more, instead of trying to hold it to yourself or be like that person that's like the know-it-all that we've all seen, right? They know everything, but nobody cares, right?
That's
Nobody
true.
knows them. You don't want to be that person either. So how can we use that money and let it flow? Realize it comes back to you so much more easily.
That's awesome. And such true principles. That's the part that I love, is the true principles. You have an ebook that you could share as a gift to them. Why don't you go ahead and tell them about that?
Yeah, so my website, moneyripples.com, I have a free ebook that's called Beyond Rice and Beans, 7 Secrets to Free Up Cash Today.
It's not about food.
It does have food on the cover. People look at the cover, they say, is this a recipe book? I'm like, close. It's a recipe, but for money.
It's your 7 secrets, right?
It is. It really is. So of all the hundreds of clients I've had, plus in my own life as well, how I was able to pay off over $900,000 in debt in 3 years, right? Things like that. I really bring it up in a very short, concise manner. And now, if you're a person like me, you don't like to sit down and read a lot, this is perfect for you. Because it's like 28 pages long, and I think that's because I put in photos and page breaks. So it's a very quick read. You could read it seriously over lunch, and you'd be done. But it's the 7 key things I've seen all my clients do that help free up the most cash. And the average client's freed up $33,000 a year just from applying these strategies. So they work. And so it's got the principles, but it's got a lot of the strategies to go with it. Very easy. And here's the great news. You don't have to be cheap. You don't have to be on a strict little tight budget or anything like that. It's actually something where you allow yourself to still have your cake and eat it too. You can be free. You can not have to live off rice and beans.
Right.
You can actually have veggies too.
So not peanut butter and jam and rice and beans?
Exactly. Because that peanut butter, you're really splurging,
Yeah, we're good.
Spread it so thin you can't even see it. It's like brown on the bread. You're like, oh, I think I smell something. Oh, I think it's peanut butter.
That's awesome. Well, and I love that it's concise and easy and simple, and just basically it's not. So many times you get into financial freedom techniques and all these different things, and it's complicated and it's hard, and you have to have someone holding your hand through. And I love that you teach principles that are simple and guidelines and definite, like black and white. Do this and this, and it really works.
It does. Absolutely.
One of the last things that I wanted to just make sure we kind of covered all that we wanted to do today is how can you make the best suggestions about not having to live paycheck to paycheck? What can you tell us to that juicy last couple minutes we have here of what would be your best information that you could help us to not have to live that paycheck to paycheck all the time?
Or less than paycheck to paycheck. This is not fun, right? I think it really, like I mentioned, it's that stewardship, right? And so if I were to pick one thing, I would definitely say that once you start meeting and you start discussing with your spouse what's going on, start really tracking your money. Really pay attention.
That's huge.
And you might teach this law. I haven't seen all of your shows, but for example, the law of attention, right? Whatever you put your attention towards expands and grows.
It's true.
Whatever you ignore will leave you. Because, for example, if you ignore your health, you're not going to be healthy, right? It just doesn't work. If you ignore your family, if you ignore your spouse, they're not going to stick around. So why would your money?
Exactly.
And so you got to pay attention to it. Here's the great news. Like you said, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to do this. It can seriously take just a few minutes a week. And so really getting on the same page. I love using tools like mint.com, things like that. It's free, it's easy to use, and you can really see what's going on.
Well, and I love that you share inexpensive or free things and ways to get involved and to track and to really figure stuff out.
Yep.
I know when I went to your seminar, and it was a couple days,
that
you play a wonderful game to begin with, the abundance game.
Love it. Yes.
And it really gets your attention to really figure out, like, wow, this is really grabbing my attention on what I'm doing wrong, or where I'm making mistakes, or where I'm not really doing things in principles and stewardship the way that we should.
That's right.
But I love that we've been able to have the cash flow expert on our show. Go to his website. Tell him again one more time.
Yep, www.moneyripples.com.
That's awesome. So Kris Miles, thank you for being here. That's amazing to have you here and share great nuggets of information. Go to his website. You really do deserve to have stewardship over your money. Learn the principles. Learn ways that you don't have to live paycheck to paycheck. And you can have those conversations with your spouse to where it is just a few minutes every week. You meet and you discuss and you track and pay attention, and your life will be different.
A few minutes, such a great investment, isn't it?
It is.
Such a little thing, but makes it such a big, big difference.
It is. When you can pay attention to the things that really matter, life doesn't have to be so hard.
And that's when all things become possible.
That's right. That's when it's all possible. Yeah. So thanks for being here. Thanks for being on our show.
Thank you for having me.
And again, I want to remind you that if you haven't gotten the 7 traits, go get the video series at www.allthingspossible.biz. And also, if you'd like a strategy session, you need to go to that Contact Us button to get your free strategy session. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on All Things Possible. Thank you. Bye-bye.